Hello and welcome to Inside Politics. My name is Anastasiya Lavrina. Today marks the 12th day of the rapidly escalating conflict between Iran, Israel and the United States. Iran has begun deploying naval mines in the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply passes. The development comes as Iran and Israel continue to exchange strikes across the region. Tehran says it has launched new waves of missile attacks toward Israeli territory, while the United States and Israel are carrying out strikes on Iranian military infrastructure, including facilities linked to missile production and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. With tensions rising across the Gulf, American naval forces have increased their presence around the strait and warned that any attempt to block the passage will provoke a strong response. Concerns are growing that the conflict is moving toward a crisis with global economic implications. To discuss this, I'm joined now by Eitan Charnov, geopolitical and security expert in Tel Aviv, and Mehmet Ogutçu, chairman of the London Energy Club and former Turkish diplomat, joining us from London. Dear experts, thank you so much for joining Inside Politics. And Mr. Charnov, if you don't mind, let's start with a question to you. Iran claims it has launched another wave of missile attacks targeting Israeli cities. How effective has Israel's air defense been so far, and is Israel preparing for a longer phase of confrontation?
So I believe that since day one, Israel has been prepared for a confrontation with Iran that could last several weeks. I think that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as President Donald Trump, have made it very clear that this is an operation that could extend as far as a month or potentially longer. So I believe that preparations were definitely made. The reality is that Israel's air defenses are faring quite well, especially when compared to the 12-day war. But part of that is not just due to lessons learned, but the reality that Iran is dedicating its ever-dwindling supply of missiles to an ever-increasing range of regional targets. So no one country is getting the full brunt of Iranians' capability. Ironically enough, it's not Israel being targeted the most, but the UAE, which has received roughly 60% of Iranian ballistic missile and drone fire, and has an incredible performance on air defenses as well, intercepting, according to their Ministry of Defense, over 90% of projectiles. Israel's rate is probably somewhere comparable, although the Israeli military is being a little bit more vague in terms of what information they're sharing this round compared to previous wars. I think part of that is to deprive Iran of information, but among Israeli social media and Telegram channels, damage compared to the 12-day war is nominal.
Well, Mr. Ogutçu, the Royal Navy maintains a presence in the Gulf and has long been involved in protecting shipping routes there. How prepared is the United Kingdom to respond if tensions around the Strait of Hormuz escalate further?
Well, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz has been affecting all countries, not only importing oil and LNG from the region, but overall its global impact will make it inevitable that every country will try to do its best to limit the damage and also stop the war from moving ahead. The UK in the beginning has been a bit defensive. Prime Minister Starmer made it very clear that we will only take part in the operations aimed at proactive, preventive and defensive matters. And we will not take part in attacks, fearing that this is going to invite Iranian retaliation. And whether he likes this or not, Iranian retaliation came. Actually, UK sovereign bases in southern Cyprus came under attack, missile attack. And UK also sent its aircraft carriers, which President Trump found to be too late. We already been there, and he wasn't very happy about Starmer's response, saying that unfortunately we don't have another Winston Churchill dealing with us. Therefore, I think there is a problem now between UK and US in terms of how to act, and we shouldn't forget that Starmer also has a storm of opposition and reactions coming from within the UK, both from the House of Commons, the media, and civil society. He has to be careful about it as well.
Absolutely. Mr. Chernov, Iran is now reportedly deploying naval mines in the Strait of Hormuz. From Israel's security perspective, how serious is this step, and does it signal a shift from direct retaliation toward a broader regional strategy?
So, since the first day, the first morning of Operation Epic Fury, Iran has lashed out against the region, against non-belligerent states, and against targets like your other guest said, as far away as Cyprus. The mining of the Straits of Hormuz were first reported in CNN yesterday, and then mentioned in other U.S. media outlets citing anonymous U.S. intelligence sources. So exactly the extent of mining and if it's happened yet, I think it still needs to be officially confirmed by the U.S. government publicly. However, if Iran is taking this action into reality and has in fact mined the straits, the primary implications are not for Israel at all, but they're for the entire globe. The truth is, it's a very rational step for Iran, given their modus operandi since the first day of the war, which is maximum pain on maximum players, with the hopes that somebody will eventually put pressure on the United States to put an end to the war. So far, it doesn't seem to be working.
So, Mr. Iguchu, you rightly pointed out that the closure of the Strait of Hormuz affect not only the countries who are importing the oil, but also overall the global economy, the, let's say, global oil market. So, more in details, from the perspective of global energy security, what is happening on the energy markets right now as tensions in the Gulf continue to rise, and how worried should Europe and Asian economies be if instability around the Strait of Hormuz persists?
Well, if the conflict goes beyond the end of March, I think the real danger will start, because up to now, I think we've been able to contain the risks of this war spreading in the region, especially in the Gulf countries, which are major producers and provide around a fifth of the global crude supply, which is around 50 million barrels per day. If you have a shortage of 50 million barrels per day in the global markets, it's going to have a significant, profound effect. But Saudi Arabia and UAE are finding as alternative routes, taking the pipeline all the way to Yanbu on the Red Sea part, around, I think, initially 3-4 million, but now the maximum capacity will be used, 7 million. And the most important, I think, measure internationally taken is today's announcement that International Energy Agency member countries, 32 member countries, will be releasing their strategic petroleum reserves gradually, because currently they hold around 1.2 billion barrels of oil in strategic reserves. And initially, I think they are going to release around 400 million. This is the highest number in history to the markets. This might perhaps ease the burden slightly, but if the war continues, and of course we saw that insurance premiums increase, and so did the transportation cost, and altogether it's fueling also not in only crude oil but also LNG supplies, almost a quarter coming from Qatar now blocked there and production suspended. And in UK and Europe, I saw that the natural gas prices almost doubled in less than 2 weeks. And this is going to have a significant inflationary pressure on the global economy at a time we don't need it. And I don't think that Israel and US will be able to complete the operations and defeat Iran as they call for before the end of the month, because Iran still controls Strait of Hormuz. They are still able to land mines to be placed, although some of their ships have already been destroyed. But they also use sophisticated missile systems that we haven't seen before. And unless there is a land forces involved entering Iran, either from Iraqi side through the Kurds or through Azerbaijan or through Pakistan, I think it will be difficult to defeat Iran altogether as Trump wants. He says, I want unconditional surrender. And also he wants to have a say in the choosing of the religious leader, which has already been chosen by the Iranians, very hardliner Khamenei the Jr. All indications show that the conflict, unless Trump bows to the pressure from the Congress and the US political circles and civil society that declare a win in the war and pull out. But Israel doesn't want that, especially Netanyahu. We know that from the very beginning. He said this is an operation that we've been looking for the past 40 years, once in a lifetime opportunity, and we will not pull out before we achieve our goals in the region. But nobody knows actually what is the end result is, what we want. Initially, it was the destruction of Iranian nuclear capacity, then ballistic missiles, then regime change. So it keeps changing. Which one is realistic that we can see as a winning case? And therefore, I think both US and Israel have to define as a responsibility to the rest of the world what is the end result and how they are going to exit this war and after which objectives will be fulfilled. Otherwise, the markets will continue to be very uneasy and the prices will widely fluctuate from $60 to $140, then come down to 82, then 92, and it's anybody's guess what the price will be. But unfortunately, we will continue to suffer from the consequences of this, not only the Gulf nations, Israel and Iran, but the whole region as well as the global economy.
Very interesting analysis, Mr. Ogutchu. Indeed, how long and this operation will last, how long this war will be lasted in the region, affecting so many countries. You mentioned Azerbaijan. According to the official statement spread by the officials in Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan will not allow to use its airspace or its territory against any third country. So this is the official position of Azerbaijani government at the moment. But indeed, you raised a very important question on what exactly is happening at the moment. So probably, Mr. Chernov, you can answer my next question. Israel and the United States continue strikes on Iranian military infrastructure. What is the strategic objective now? Deterrence, degradation of Iran's capabilities, or something broader?
So on the first day of the war, both the leaders of Israel and the United States gave remarkably similar speeches where they laid out military objectives and political objectives. Military objectives, further destruction of nuclear program, decimation of weapons capabilities, and I think a very important distinction made by President Trump, if I recall correctly, is the destruction of their manufacturing capabilities as well. Then there's a political objective of regime change. I think that Trump fashions himself a tough negotiator, and part of me wonders, is regime change an icing on the cake for these leaders? Is it their true objective, or is that part of a long-term negotiating ploy that eventually, when this war ends, okay, no regime change, but let's talk about those missiles and nuclear programs? It's hard to say exactly what the president is thinking, but I do believe that there's multiple layers of objectives. But I want to actually leave with a greater question, which is, even if this war were to wrap up this week, next week, 3 weeks from now, sometime within that March window that the other guest said, how does Iran behave? Forget how do they negotiate, but do they continue to be a belligerent actor in the Strait of Hormuz? Even with the war ending, are the waterways going to be safe? That, to me, is one of the lingering questions that I don't have an answer for.
Mr. Ogutchu, you rightly pointed out before that United Kingdom's didn't try to be involved in this war from any perspective. That's why Donald Trump is now so much dissatisfied by the official position of London in the beginning of this escalation. And indeed, Europe is trying to stay out of the war in the Middle East. But realistically, can that position last?
I don't think so. It's not only UK, but also other EU countries will have to be involved somehow. Though, I mean, the closure of the Hormuz will not affect proportionately so much the European countries. Their share is only 3%. It's mostly China, India, Korea, Japan, and Taiwan, which is importing most of their LNG and crude from the Gulf region. But there is an attempt to get also NATO countries involved in this conflict. And Turkey has been, as you know, as a country neighbor to Iran and never changed the border since Kasr-e-Shirin agreement in 17th century. And although regional rivals, they want to keep at least good neighborly relations. And there was attempts to also bring Turkey to the conflict by firing 2 missiles, and where it came from, it was not confirmed. Iranian regime denied that they had any role in that. So there is so much confusion about who is doing what, and false alarms, false firing. And so there are attempts to bring not only Gulf nations, but also NATO countries, and also Cyprus is another matter, EU country, to be brought into conflict. And unless there is a unified position vis-a-vis Iran, and also perhaps having a good understanding of common position, if need be, between United States, Israel, and the Gulf nations, I think confusion will continue because individual efforts will not go anywhere. Iran, of course, people are suffering there, the innocent people, civilians, and unfortunately, in a wartime, there are always the collateral damage, and I think utmost attention has to be paid that, including primary school children being killed, about 165 children, innocent. So in a wartime, yes, there's always such casualties. And if it continues like this, it's not only the world economy, but the whole Iran will be destroyed. And more importantly, I don't think anybody is talking about it, but I should tell you here, as it happened during the Iraq invasion of Kuwait, after the war is over, the party who started that and caused all the damage will have to pay compensation. That means, the Gulf nations, I don't know about Israel, whether they will have such a claim, and other neighboring countries, and the ship owners, traders, which suffer significantly and financially, will knock on the doors of Iran, saying that you have to compensate this from your oil and natural gas revenues. And with Iraq, it was about 30 years they have to pay almost a quarter of their revenues. So it will be devastating for Iran beyond what's already happening to its infrastructure and its people.
This is a very interesting point, Mr. Ogucu. We will come back to this, but now, Mr. Chernov, about the conditions Iran is saying now to stop this war. Iran has already said it could consider ending the conflict only under 3 conditions: the immediate cessation of the Israeli and United States strikes on its territory, then the guarantee that such attacks will not be repeated in the future, the recognition of Iran's right to respond to threats, and also some sources providing the information that Iran required a compensation. So from Israel's perspective, what conditions would need to be met for this war to come to an end, if any?
Israel's not operating in a vacuum. It's a close partner of the United States. In fact, their air force is essentially operating interoperably as a single fighting unit. So this isn't purely up to Israel when this war ends, but I think that the past 3 years since October 7th have created a low tolerance policy in the Israeli government for threats. And whatever agreement ends this war with Iran, and by the way, there's a potential for cessation of hostilities without any formal agreements. I believe that Israel's government will not just reserve the right to act if they feel a new threat emerging from within Iranian territory. I believe that they will act hastily in order to address it, whether that be with the United States or on their own. They feel that they had military hegemony in the region post-12-day war, and they plan to wield their defenses, I think, relatively proactively from an Israeli perspective to prevent the next October 7th.
And Mr. Ogucu, my last question to you. You already partially answered it about Turkey, which has recently announced plans to strengthen its air defense after a missile entered its airspace twice. What does this signal about Ankara's concerns? Turkey is a member of NATO, just to confirm it once again. And how vulnerable is the South Caucasus itself to potential spillover from the Middle East conflict?
Well, Turkey is a very powerful nation, militarily, economically, all the way. You start from the walls of China to Germany, Russia to Saudi Arabia is the largest power to reckon with in many regards. So if Iran is trying to provoke Turkey into war, I think this is going to be a huge blow to Iran or any other nation trying to do it. And however, Turkey, as Erdogan also mentioned today, is well prepared to respond to any attack in a very stern manner. And but beyond Turkey, also I heard that the Trump talked already to Putin a few days ago, and in U.S. press there is suggestion that perhaps Putin might be coming in as a mediator because he has good relations, of course, with Tehran. And Chinese also sent a special envoy to Riyadh. He might be going to Tehran. So there is some movement in the area. If there is serious willingness to stop the war from moving ahead after having achieved most of its initial goals, I think Turkey, Russia, and China might be the only countries which could step in and talk. And Turkey, I think, has the greatest chance because it is in talking terms to Iranian president, religious leader, foreign minister, as well as to Trump and other powers. The only problem, I think, is that Turkey and Israel have to mend defenses somehow. They should be in talking terms as well, not only in the case of the current war going on in the Gulf and Iran, but also in Gaza. So my personal opinion is that time has come for both nations to start talking each other. They don't need to love each other, but realpolitik requires that these two major nations in the Middle East have to come to terms for a common understanding, and responsibility lies both in Tel Aviv and Ankara for making this happen. So this could also help Turkey to play a more effective mediating role.
Absolutely, dear experts. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. That's why I thank you both for your contribution to our today's episode of Inside Politics. Thank you.
A pleasure, Anastasiya. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will continue to closely follow developments as the situation in the Middle East evolves. The conflict remains highly volatile, with missile exchanges ongoing, tensions rising across the Strait of Hormuz, and the risks of further escalation across the region continuing to grow. Thank you for watching Inside Politics. Stay with us on A News for further updates and analysis.